Your Excellency Hilahaini, Excellencies of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you all warm greetings from the people of the Republic of Vanuatu, who I am privileged to represent at this historic Climate Vulnerable Forum virtual summit. Vanuatu is proud to be a member of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, not because of our vulnerability, but because of our strength, our ambition, and our unwavering dedication to change the business-as-usual context that has brought us to this point of human history. International climate negotiations have been ongoing for decades, but they show remarkably poor progress on emissions reduction, while the effects of climate change worsen daily. Here is where we, the CVF membership, must step up and take the reins of climate leadership. The recent IPCC special report confirms the validity of our Pacific Island red line on the absolute necessity of limiting the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Anything beyond this amplifies the exposure of small islands to climate-related risks to health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, and human security. Science tells us with a high degree of confidence that global warming is likely to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2030 and 2052 if we continue with business as usual. This is unconscionable. Breaching this threshold is a catastrophic and existential threat. And so we as the climate vulnerable nations must, as a priority, see to it that business as usual ends once and for all. Here is what we in the most climate vulnerable countries must do to show highest ambition and lead the world through this crisis. Firstly, all parties need to demonstrate the highest levels of ambition to dramatically reduce emissions, aiming for net zero well before 2050. While Vanuatu is only responsible for 0.0016% of global emissions, Vanuatu has made a commitment to achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030, to reducing energy sector emissions by 30% from business as usual levels, and to reaching a near-term 65% renewable energy target by 2020 for electricity generation. Vanuatu is also currently ramping up our nationally determined contribution, NDC, with highest ambition targets for mitigation and adaptation. Beyond that, we are putting our own limited financial resources where our mouth is, allocating 15% of Vanuatu's overall fiscal space to improve climate resilience in the 2019 government budget policy. Secondly, we must prioritize resilience in all development activities. Vanuatu's National Sustainable Development Plan prioritizes climate-resilient development pathways in ensuring our ability to meet the 2030 SDGs. Vanuatu's new policy on climate change-induced displacement makes a clear call for those forced to migrate due to climate change to continue to have equal opportunities to share in the country's growing security and prosperity by implementing durable solutions and sustainable recovery paths. Thirdly, we must build our own capacity. In 2014, Vanuatu revised its school curriculum from kindergarten to year 13 to include climate issues in every subject at every level, from social sciences to geography to mathematics and physical education. Our students are now becoming fully informed about climate change in order for us to lead the change. Vanuatu's technical and vocational schools are also now teaching fully accredited certificate courses in climate resilience. Fourthly, we need to cooperate meaningfully and enable action by all stakeholders. Vanuatu's forward-looking Ministry of Climate Change and our innovative National Advisory Board on Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction are unique institutions mandated to coordinate action horizontally among all sectors, vertically across levels, and in participation with a range of actors. I am proud of our Vanuatu Climate Action Network of NGOs and the Vanuatu Business Resilience Committee of hundreds of local businesses for stepping up to show that they are an essential part of the solutions we need. Colleagues, I also am devastated and appalled that economic nearsightedness and greed among most developed countries means that even if all current NDCs are fully implemented, warming is still on track to surpass 3 degrees Celsius over the course of the century. The injustice of climate change is that the impacts are felt first and hardest by those with the least responsibility for its causes. Vanuatu is on the front lines of climate change, and yet we have benefited least from the exploitation of fossil fuels that has caused it. The cost of climate protection and adaptation projects runs to many billions of dollars and far exceeds our public resources. Due to a single tropical cyclone in 2015, Vanuatu lost 64.1% of its GDP. That is, total economic loss and damage impacts of $449.4 million US. The Vanuatu Green Climate Fund urgent project pipeline requirements top $700 million US. But with our nearest developed country neighbours in the Pacific refusing to replenish the GCF, I seriously doubt whether any of these critical interventions for the most vulnerable people on the planet will see the light of day. Largely because we are a least developed country, my people are among those with the least ability to engage with the global decisions that will shape their future. That is why, on behalf of my people on the smallest and most remote islands in Vanuatu, I am here in this forum fighting for a global paradigm shift. Low carbon development is the only development this planet can afford. It makes environmental sense, social sense, and economic sense. The triple bottom line must become the de facto approach to our planetary development paradigm. The IPCC report makes it clear there is no way to mitigate climate change without getting rid of coal. We need to keep coal in the ground. We also need to stop producing and consuming plastics and other fossil fuel-based products. The plastic pollution that is killing our oceans is choking the Great Pacific carbon sink and increasing the climate vulnerability of coastal and pelagic marine ecosystems. Vanuatu's capital city of Port Vila was recently awarded the Global Green City Award, highlighting our first in the Pacific ban on petroleum-based plastic bags, takeaway containers, and plastic straws, which happened in July this year. This is just one example of the no-apology measures Vanuatu is taking to demonstrate climate leadership. Other outright bans are being considered wherever a product or industry is antithetical to our national climate resilience. Colleagues, the transformation that scientists tell us is critical is going to take many shake-ups, most of which will be painful ones. It is our role as leaders to lead the charge in shaking the tree to make these changes. Earlier this year, I made a call for the global establishment of climate damages taxes. There is a strong justification to tax the fossil fuel industry, producers of coal, oil and gas, to pay for that climate change, loss and damage that their industry is causing. Because just 90 corporations are responsible for extracting, producing and profiting from fossil fuels that contribute over 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, generating for themselves over $80 billion in profits per year, there is a strong moral argument that these dirty energy revenues be used for the alleviation and avoidance of the suffering caused by climate impacts in developing countries. Furthermore, by hiding what they knew and misrepresenting the dangers of unabated fossil fuel use, the fossil fuel industry and supportive governments have protected their high emissions profits and obstructed the changes needed to prevent or at least minimize the impacts of climate change. I am therefore today putting the fossil fuel industry and the states that sponsor it on notice that the climate loss and damages ravaging Vanuatu will not go unchallenged. My government is now exploring all avenues to utilize the judicial system in various jurisdictions, including under international law, to shift the costs of climate protection back onto the fossil fuel companies, the financial institutions, and the governments that actively and knowingly created this existential threat to my country. Much must happen in Katowice over the coming weeks. Vanuatu is committed to completing and adopting comprehensive, robust, and effective implementation guidelines at COP24, which will enable full, ambitious implementation of the Paris Agreement. Note that Vanuatu considers full implementation as including adaptation and loss and damage. Of course, the guidelines must also contain the fiscal provisions to ensure that Vanuatu's demoralizing climate financing gap does not further widen, so that we can fully transition to the zero carbon future we have set for ourselves. I am optimistically but aggressively going to engage at COP24, ready to work with partners seeking meaningful change, ready to defend and hold our positions against naysayers. The Paris Agreement is ambitious because every nation sets and commits to its own specific targets, but I will not for one moment allow those self-set commitments to destroy the livelihoods or undermine the basic human rights of the people of Vanuatu or the most climate vulnerable nations. COP21 saw the birth of the Paris Agreement, and Vanuatu will make sure that Katowice, or as UNFCCC Executive Secretary calls it, Paris 2.0, puts together the pieces, directions and guidelines in order to make the framework really operate. So I believe this moment, the coalescence of science, political will and globalized innovation can be the high ambition turning point for the world. The Climate Vulnerable Forum has shown that we have both the will and the ability to take on this challenge. It has not been easy, and further progress will not come quickly. For that reason, we do not plan on being complacent. This is the Climate Vulnerable Forum's time. I thank you.